Well, hello again, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at Luke lesson 34 in Luke chapter 4, verses 38 through 41, entitled Jesus Heals, as you could probably tell from the picture on the screen. And so in verse 38, we're told, "Now he, Jesus, arose from the synagogue and entered Simon's house. But Simon's wife's mother was sick or afflicted with a high fever. They made request of him concerning her. So he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she rose and served him. When the sun was setting, all those who had any that were sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And demons also came out of many, crying out and saying, 'You are the Christ, the Son of God.' And he, rebuking them, did not allow them to speak, for they knew that he was the Christ." So if you remember last week's lesson, he cast a demon out of a man in the synagogue. And now he's left the synagogue after his day's work there and has moved on to Simon Peter's house. And we see this passage. So he's been teaching in the synagogue, and now this time, it's interesting, he taught in the synagogue in Nazareth, and the religious leaders got so incensed with him that they tried to get the people to throw him off a cliff. Now he's in a synagogue in Capernaum, and he's being welcomed and appreciated in the city of Capernaum. And I noted that Jesus is willing to enter anywhere that he's asked, and miracles and ministry follow. He never responds with criticism, always with love and compassion. And I thought of Revelation 3:20, showing his compassion. He said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and dine with him and he with me." So he doesn't barge through your door. He's going to need to be invited in. In John 8, verses 10 and 11, this is a story where they bring a woman to Jesus that they say they caught her in the act of adultery. And that's a whole study and passage to look at in the future. But when he had bent down, written in the sand, all of the people dropped the rocks that they were going to stone her with and walked off one at a time. Then Jesus himself raised himself up and saw that no one but the woman was there. And he said to her, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." So we see plenty of examples of Jesus being compassionate to people and people in need. Now, as we go on in this passage, they're at Simon's house. So obviously, Peter had a house. He had a wife, according to this passage, and apparently a mother-in-law living with him. And maybe other family members, maybe other disciples. I have no idea. But we know that he had a thriving fishing business. And yet he was able and willing to leave it all to go with Jesus when Jesus said, "Follow me." In fact, in Matthew 4, verses 18 to 20, we're told Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And I love this. Immediately, without hesitation, they left their nets and followed him. I read this verse along with the next couple about James and John, Peter's fishing partners, and I'm amazed at their immediate responses to get up and walk away from their business, their families, other friends. The same thing happened with Matthew, who walked away from a very lucrative tax collecting business at the gate of entrance into Capernaum at the northern end of the Galilee Sea. So now he's at Peter's house, and the mother-in-law is sick with a high fever. And Peter's and the people with him asked Jesus to do something, having seen all that they had previously seen him do. And there was no hesitation on their part to ask him. And they understood his compassion, and they believed that he could help her. And so Jesus immediately went to her. It doesn't say he laid hands on her. He stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left immediately, and she was up and going about her business. There was no hesitation on her part. They asked in faith, and you delivered. And it just struck me, everything is being done immediately and without hesitation. And just as a note, we have to remember that this is Dr. Luke describing this event. So we can be pretty sure that he had she had a raging fever, because he would be able to determine that. But somehow Jesus seemed to discern that this was a demonic attack on her, not just a normal fever that we might experience. And so that reminded me of discernment. In 1 Corinthians 12:10, when Paul's teaching us on spiritual gifts, in verse 10, it says, to another, the working of miracles, to another, prophecy, to another, discerning of spirits. And then later in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 31, it says, but earnestly desire the best or most appropriate gift. So when you put those together, you see this woman didn't need a word in tongues or administrations, on how to organize her kitchen or to fill out her budget. She needed a gift of healing. And Jesus discerned the spirit that was in her and dealt with it. So he exhibited the gift of the spirit of discerning spirits, that the Holy Spirit within him enabled him to use. That was the gift that was necessary at the moment. And Matthew 21:22, we're told, whatever things you ask in prayer, believing, you will receive. And in 1 John 5:14, now this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything, and I think this is the key, according to his will, he hears us. So basically ask, believe, and according to his will. Now, just observation, he rebuked the fever because it was a demonic spirit. It had no right to attack her, and Jesus admonishes it. He censored it sternly because the fever was a demonic attack. In general, I think sickness comes about because of sin in the world, of which you and I ourselves are contributors. We're responsible for most of the sicknesses we experience because we don't take care of ourselves the way we should. But this obviously was different. It was a demonic attack from the enemy, perhaps because she was preparing to serve them dinner at the end of the Sabbath day. And so Jesus rebukes the spirit. Notice it had to obey him. I don't see her doing anything in this passage. And looking at the picture, that probably is how it appeared. She didn't do anything. She didn't feel her forehead to see if the fever was gone. She just got up and started working immediately. And they asked you, and you did it. And they must have had faith to ask, and you honored their little faith. And we often say seeing is believing. In the spiritual realm, believing is seeing. He rebuked the spirit and she got up and went to serving. I mean, no hesitation, didn't question it whatsoever. So a life lesson in this for me, I think, is I believe that Jesus still heals and casts out demons today. We need to discern what we're praying against or what we're dealing with, and then believe in faith and be sure what we're asking is according to his will. And then command or rebuke in his name if it is a demonic spirit. Then drop the mic and walk away. He just rebuked the spirit. That's the sum total of his words. It wasn't a long, lengthy prayer. It wasn't a bunch of people all joining together to pray over her. He just spoke the words, rebuked the spirit. And a lot of times what we're dealing with is a spiritual issue, and that's what we need to do. It's not a matter of praying for healing as much as it is rebuking a spirit that's causing the problem. So I just noticed the lady could have just laid there and felt her head and said, I still feel a little bit weak, and nothing would have happened. She wouldn't have been healed. But she believed, as evidence to me by her, she got up and went to work. Jesus told the spirit to come out, which I believe is a spirit of infirmity. And she believed it and it left. Luke 17, verses 11 to 14. We'll be looking at this probably 3 years from now at the speed we're going. Now it happened that as he went to Jerusalem, he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. And then as he entered a certain village, there met him 10 men who were lepers, who stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And so when he saw them, he said to them, Go, show yourselves to the priest. That was it. He didn't touch them. He didn't say any kind of words over them other than telling them, go and show yourselves to the priest. And we're told, and so it was that as they went, they were cleansed. He just spoke the word to them. They believed him. They turned around and headed back to town to show themselves to the priest. And that's an amazing passage when we get to that in the future. There's a whole lot more to this than just what we see here, that they were healed when they got there. Others were brought the sick. So as this day wore on, the news spread fast, and those coming must have also had the faith to believe. Faith is catching. You even healed healed diseases, laying hands on those that were afflicted. Everyone was healed. That's what the passage says. And no one was turned away. No one left sick. No one. And we have to note that this is the evening of the Sabbath. So the reason people are able to come, we know that he was teaching in the synagogue that morning, and people aren't allowed to get up and walk around more than, I think, 50 feet or 100 feet or something. And so they would had to have waited till sundown that they were free to get up and get about. And you can read about that in John 5. But the Sabbath, I just noted that Jesus probably taught most of the day. Then he walks to Peter's house, has dinner, ministers to his mother-in-law, and he was probably wasted physically. And yet when people came to him for help, he graciously ministered to them without hesitation. Jesus is available to anyone at any time for any reason, no questions asked. And I just remember preaching 3 services in one day, also 2 services, and then doing a 6-hour seminar. I mean, you're absolutely exhausted just from the stress of ministering for the Lord and the weight that puts on you. But in 2 Timothy 4:2, this is a perfect picture of Jesus. We're told, preach the word, be ready in season and out of season, no matter when it is, where it is, why it is. Convince, rebuke, which he just did, exhort, and with all suffering or patience and teaching, anytime, day or night. And so that's what we're commanded to do, to be prepared no matter how tired we are, what time of the day it is, when the need comes, that's what we should do. Now, you also notice here that the demon came out. Some of, if not much, of our sickness and disease, I think, is demonic affliction. We can't be possessed by a demon, but I need to recognize it for what it is. I can be harassed by them. And even if it's our lifestyle that brought it on, still be a demonic attack and needs to be dealt with in his name. That's where a spirit of discernment that you get when you're full of the Holy Spirit to understand what it is you're dealing with. And interestingly, the demons knew who they were dealing with, who Jesus was. Jesus, the Christ, the Son of God, they didn't put up a fight. So I noticed how the town is bringing people who are sick or demon possessed, oppressed, distressed. How many people around us are the same? We have people all around us every day that are in these conditions. And so my question is, as I was wrapping this up on that morning of the devotion, I said, why don't we feel the need to go to or why do we feel the need to go to some well-known healer or pastor when we have the same Holy Spirit in us and in the people we're around? The same Spirit that anointed Jesus and enabled him to do this. I don't think we understand how badly the Lord wants to work through us. And finally, in Mark 9:24, a father who brought his child to Jesus asked him to heal him. And the Lord said, just believe. And the man, it says, immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. So that would be the prayer for us today. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That he'll do exactly what he said if it's according to his will. And so that's it for today, guys. We'll be seeing you hopefully on Sunday evening. We'll be in Revelation chapter 20. And the story gets really good. So hopefully you'll be able to with us live. And if not, I'll send the video out as soon as I'm able. So that's it for today. God bless. Have a great week. And we'll see you Sunday.